Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 10, Text 21. Translation. Is it not a fact that your good self is the direct representative of Kapila Dev, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? To examine people and see who is actually a human being and who is not, you have presented yourself to be a deaf and dumb person. Are you not moving this way upon the surface of the world? I am very attached to family life and worldly activities, and I am blind to spiritual knowledge. Nonetheless, I am now present before you, and am seeking enlightenment from you. How can I advance in spiritual life? Purport. Although Maharaj Rahugana was playing the part of a king, he had been informed by Jadabharata that he was not a king, nor was Jadabharata deaf and dumb. Such designations were simply coverings of the spirit soul. Everyone must come to this knowledge, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Dehinosmin yatha dehe. Everyone is encased within the body. Since the body is never identical with the soul, the bodily activities are simply illusory. In the association of such a sadhu as Jadabharata, Maharaj Rahugana came to the awareness that his activities as a royal authority were simply illusory phenomena. He therefore agreed to receive knowledge from Jadabharata, and that was the beginning of his perfection. Tad vigyanartam sagurum eva bigachet. A person like Maharaj Rahugana, who was very inquisitive to know the value of life and the spiritual science, must approach a personality like Jadabharata. Tasmad gurum papoje tajigyasushe uttamam. One must approach a guru like Jadabharata, a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to inquire about the goal of human life. Savaya bhavan loka nirikshanatam avyaktalingo vicharachyapi svit yogeshwaranam gatimanda buddhi katam vichakshita grihanubandha. Is it not a fact that your good self is the direct representative of Kapila Dev, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? To examine people and see who is actually a human being and who is not, you have presented yourself to be a deaf and dumb person. Are you not moving this way upon the surface of the world? I am very attached to family life and worldly activities, and I am blind to spiritual knowledge. Nonetheless, I am now present before you and am seeking enlightenment from you. How can I advance in spiritual life? Sometimes a saintly personality will manifest himself in a foolish way so that he is not disturbed by others, or sometimes he does it just to study others. Bharat Maharaj was not studying others. The king Maharaj Rahugana is making many statements now and in the future, which will mainly be wrong. And then he will be chastised by Jadabharata for all of his foolish misconceptions, because he has many misconceptions, because he thinks first of all that he is a king. He thinks that Jadabharata was deaf and dumb, a foolish person, and he's very much attached to his family life and his body, his worldly activities. So he will say many things. He could not conceive of why anybody would be playing the part of a deaf and dumb person unless he could just go around and observe others. This is the king's vision. Because the king would think the only time he would ever do such an act like this would be if he has to go and do some spying mission. So he's thinking, Jadabharata, he must also be on some kind of spying mission, so that he can observe the people in general when they don't know that he's observing them. And then he can find out what they're doing. That's also interesting to a certain extent. We were in one caravan in Germany. We were traveling from program to program. And in the back it's all got a certain kind of plastic on it that you can only see out and nobody can see in. So we were all sitting there observing people. And when people don't know they're being observed, they allow their natural misery to manifest on their faces. But as soon as they find out somebody's looking at them, then immediately they're very, very smiling and happy and like this. But when they don't know anyone's looking at them, they're naturally miserable. And you can see this. You can see this natural misery on their faces. So we were all just observing that. So that is interesting too. So sometimes it is interesting to see how everybody's in Maya. That interest lasts for a few minutes, and then it's finished for this lifetime. You don't need to know anymore. So Jadabharata certainly may have observed so many things, but his business was not to observe or be observed. His business was to simply wait for the duration of this life to finish, maintain thinking about, remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then at the end to go back home, back to Godhead. This was his whole purpose. So he had no purpose in going around and observing the material world. He wasn't going to get anywhere. What is the use of examining people and seeing who's a human being or not? And how will that benefit anyone? Especially nowadays. You may examine so many people and find out if they're human beings. Well, you'll find out they're not human beings. Then what? Simply finding out and saying, oh, he's not a human being, he's not a human being, he's not a human being. But you don't do anything to change that, then you're a rascal. What would be the purpose of Jadabharata? Saying, all right, these are not human beings, and then doing nothing to change it because he was not speaking. He was acting like deaf and dumb. Therefore, if one is acting deaf and dumb, yet does nothing to change the situation of others who he sees are suffering, then he is to be considered a great rascal. Jadabharata is a Paramahamsa. He did not see others in that way. He saw them all engaged in their various occupational services to Krishna, gaining and suffering the result of their karma. And he was too. Therefore he was not very much concerned about everybody else. He knew he had to keep himself fixed at the lotus feet of the Lord. Then someone may ask, then why did he bring this point up? Why he, even speaking to Maharaj Rahugana, why he didn't just suffer his lot? Because Jadabharata knew this man, he had some interest in absolute truth, but was uncultured, spiritually uncultured, did not know anything. Yet he was presenting himself as an authority. That is very bad. If someone presents himself as an authority, yet knows nothing, then this person is very dangerous in the human society. Anyone who presents himself as a learned person, yet has no learning. One who presents himself as a cultured person, yet has no culture, then he's very, very dangerous in the human society. And he should be very carefully avoided. Nowadays we find all persons who are in leadership positions in the modern society are in this condition. Not qualified, yet presenting themselves as qualified, and falsely leading others to destruction. This is the nature of the present condition of this world. Maharaj Rahugana, he admits, I'm blind to spiritual knowledge. Yet in the next verses he will start talking how Jadabharata was wrong in his description of the soul. This is a typical puffed up executive. Because he thinks everybody has to bow down before me because I'm king. So I also know something about philosophy. Yeah. This is a typical example of modern day fool. Everybody has knowledge, they think. Even the street sweeper, he can speak great philosophy. Yeah. But actually nobody has knowledge. But when one comes before one who has knowledge, one should be submissive. He should not start putting forward that, I think you're wrong. Of course, in the beginning, you can put your head on the chopping block. You can say, yes, you're wrong. You're putting your head on the chopping block when you come before a spiritual, one who really knows. Because then he just... takes care of the situation. He makes sure that head on the chopping block gets fixed up. Of course, it is not the business of saintly persons to chop off heads. That is not the purpose. But this is an analogy, an example, to show how the saintly person will sever the material conception, the bodily concept of life, will take away the false idea in the head, and will put in the right idea. But it will sometimes be a little painful. I would suppose getting your head chopped is not very painful. It seems to be the best method for finishing off somebody. Very quick, finished. Nowadays they have so many speculated methods which, of course, are painful. This is very quick, finished. So, similarly, when you come before an advanced person, he very quickly just finishes you off materially. But then one may object, no, I don't accept this, I don't want this. I want to keep my material existence, so therefore they cannot do. But one who wants to cut the knot of the material world, wants to sever his connection with the material world, for him, when the saintly person just finishes off his material existence rather fast, he appreciates it. He thinks, this is very nice. See how wonderfully that has just happened. Yeah. Oh, that is so nice. One who doesn't really want, he thinks, oh, this is intolerable. That is why sometimes it is very, very difficult to give a class when there's a mixture in the audience of advanced devotees and neophyte, total neophyte. Because then you may get in trouble. You speak something which the advanced devotees will appreciate, but the neophyte will say, well, how can he say that? It's like we have this trouble in the Govindas, because there are usually 80% of the audience is very experienced Radio Krishna listeners, and they want to hear the more advanced philosophy. And 20% of the audience is complete neophyte, never heard anything before. And of the 20%, usually 1% is envious. So then they always ask all these nonsense challenges and questions and foolish things. And then we just chop the head very quickly. All the advanced people say, very good, very good. And the 20% neophyte, 19 other percent neophytes, they say, not bad. And then the 1%, they start screaming and yelling and pounding and say they represent everybody, that they hate me. And then everybody throws them out the door and they go away frustrated. This happens almost every Sunday now. It's like a regulative principle. Because you cannot really mix audiences like that. It is very, very difficult, because there's a very much different subject matter for one who wants to surrender to Krishna and one who does not want to surrender to Krishna. There's a different mixture of subject matter for those who want to become pure devotees and those who do not want to become pure devotees. Therefore, we have our gatherings, Srimad Bhagavatam class, specifically for the devotee. Of course, others may come. But in the Vedic time, Sudra was forbidden to hear Veda. He was especially forbidden to speak it. He could hear it under certain occasions, if he was under the employ of one who knew how to keep him under control. But if you bring Sudras into an assembly of spiritual knowledge, they will pollute it. Because they have no interest whatsoever in the spiritual subject matter. And one can never talk about the spiritual philosophy. He's busy talking about the body. That they will understand. But as soon as you come to the platform of God, they go, God, religion, forget this. We thought that stuff died years ago. This way it's going on. Therefore, we are careful when we preach. We have to discriminate between who is who and what is what. Now, therefore, Jadabharata, he also did not engage in philosophical discussions with his foolish brothers. He did not engage in philosophical discussions with the other madmen or dullards who he might have been in association with due to the fact he was playing the part of one of them. He did not talk to people in general who have no concern for spiritual life. But he talked to one who was capable of hearing it. He figured other brahmanas, they already know, no need to get involved. But this person, he's capable and he has the position to understand. But he's simply foolish. Now we will straighten him up. Why? Because I'm having to carry his palanquin. I don't mind carrying his palanquin. I'll go on carrying his palanquin. But I'm not going to step on the ants. And this is just going to go on and on and on. So better we take care of this fool's bodily conception of life right away, so that we can peacefully go on carrying his palanquin. This is intelligence. One who's intelligent, he also knows very quickly when he gets to a point wherein he's stuck. It takes a fool a long time to find out he's stuck. But an intelligent person, he can see it right away. Just like I don't know how come, but the former world's #1 chess player, he likes Krishna consciousness, so he comes. So we end up talking about, I don't know anything about chess myself, but I know that when they are playing, they sit there, and then even though they've made only 2 moves, they may sit there for an hour, and then all of a sudden one man will give up. I never understood this. But they calculate it so that they know there's no way they can win. They've calculated it so. They know after 2 moves or 4 moves that the other has so cleverly trapped them that there's no way to win, so they don't waste their time. They just say, okay, I quit. So it's intelligence. When you know the way it works, you know the material chessboard, you know how the pieces move. This one moves that way, that one moves this way. And you know that the other also knows to a certain degree how these things move. Then you also know when to give up trying to do something in the material world. You also know this is not going to succeed. This is going to be a failure. Therefore, don't bother. Similarly, Jadabharata, he knew this situation I'm in is not going to succeed unless I straighten him out. Because he's never going to understand that I don't want to step on the ants. First of all, I can't tell him in this manifestation of Jad. Jad means dull. And he's never going to understand because he has no brain to understand that these are spirit souls in a body. I have no right to kill them, but he doesn't know that. So there's no way out. So therefore, I'm going to now give him a good instruction, which he should take. If he does not take, what can I do? It is my duty. Brahmana's duty is to teach the kings. Of course, Mahajahugana, although he was not a spiritually cultured person, he at least had a great desire to learn. And although he will say, I think you're wrong, but he was not making that a big issue. He's made his case, stated all of his foolishness, exposed it to Jadabharata, who then began to kick him in the head. My dear king, you're not very experienced and you're a big fool. And here's why. And just completely cleaned away all the misconceptions that Maharaj Rahugana had. So this is actually nice. Maharaj Rahugana, although we may say he's speaking all wrong, and although we may say he has no culture for getting on the case of Jadabharata, still it was very nice. Because as soon as he saw that Jadabharata was a great learned Brahmana, he immediately fell off his palanquin on the floor and begged forgiveness. This is so nice. Nowadays, you even go see some executive head of state. There are some heads of state even today which like and appreciate the Krishna consciousness. But there are some, mainly all of them, 90%, 95%. They have no intelligence in their heads. They're simply a bunch of petty anti-politicians who have no brains. They simply know how to stay in power and win electoral votes by giving all the people all the sense gratification they want, or cheating them in such a way that they know they're being cheated, which is mainly what they do. So, if you give them good instruction and you prove to them in 1,000 ways that they are completely wrong and they don't know anything, they will simply smile, shake your hand, and then go on their own ways without any concern. Because they're politicians. It means you smile, shake the hand, kiss the babies. This is what is to be done. This is going on all over the world. It's a very, very bad situation, especially nowadays. No proper leaders. None. Kali Yuga does not create leadership quality. Kali Yuga creates Sudras. Kalo Sudra Sambhava. Kali Yuga makes big Sudras. This is the nature of Kali Yuga. It does not create proper leaders. Proper philosophical leaders, brahmanas, does not create also the executive heads of state. It simply creates rascals. That's all. Because that is the way of which the modes of passion and ignorance are working. Degrading, dragging down, destroying any good quality. Ignorance, making one more and more mad, unable to understand anything. Can't even understand he's a living being. Simplest thing. Can't even understand he's a living being. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how foolish a person is who can't even understand he's a living being? I mean, this is what we are dealing with. A society where people are so stupid they don't even know they're a living being. It's absurd. I'm a pile of chemicals. Yeah. Of course, Maharaj Rugana says, I'm blind to spiritual knowledge. I mean, I don't know these things. I know how to manipulate people. I mean, it's my duty as a king, after all. I can manipulate people, he'll say tomorrow. Tomorrow and the next day. No, when? Friday. He'll speak about how his duty as a king is to manipulate people. Make them do things. By force, even. He was such a king, he said at the end that if I make them act by force, then they will gradually diminish the reactions of their sinful activities, because they will be forced to act according to their karma, and they will become purified. This means no understanding. Not even understanding his own varnashram system. Because by force, you may force some sudras to act, but actually, ultimately, that also is not the best thing. If there is a society which is based on enlightened principles, even the sudras like to act out of duty. Yes, this is a fact. Even just recently, still in Vrindavan, once there was one great disturbance. One group of sudras were on strike. Strikes were never heard of before. But about 20 years ago, they started this business of making a strike. So they made a strike. So one devotee, very intelligent, he brought them into his room, gave them chairs to sit on, and brought in some drink for them to drink. And as soon as they saw the chair, they immediately remembered what they're supposed to do in the society. They sat on the floor. They said, no, we cannot. Then the drinks came in. They said, no, we cannot take this. He was giving them all kinds of respect. And they were saying, no, forget the strike. They understood that, yes, if he starts respecting us, if the brahmanas start respecting the sudras, everything's going to go to hell, even for the sudras. So therefore, they said, no, we don't want this. And they were the leaders of the whole thing. They said, we forget the strike. We quit the strike. Because there still was enough brain at that time for them to understand that if we do this, the whole thing goes to hell. And when the whole thing goes to hell, it's the worst thing for us. Because we're going to be really exploited. At least now, maybe we don't get enough money that we think we should get. But later on, we're not going to get anything but trouble. So actually in the Varnashram society, the peace is maintained by each individual who understands that this is the best thing for everybody. Spiritual society. This is the best thing for everybody. Maharaja Hugana, he knew that too. Although he had no understanding, he at least knew the Brahmanas were to be absolutely, totally respected. At least he understood that. And although he was thinking, let's force these people to act, Jadabharata will also clean up that misconception as well. When the king or leader has no spiritual knowledge, no one else will have spiritual knowledge either. That principle also works in our Krishna conscious society. Leaders must be the best preachers. I probably already told you this, but once I was in Vrindavan, I was Srila Prabhupada's BBT secretary. And I was very happy doing that. I mean, just taking care of Prabhupada's books and everything. I thought this was the best. So one day I was giving a lecture, Bhagavad Gita lecture, on verse 8.1. And a whole bunch of people from Vrindavan were there. And Prabhupada was sitting under the tree listening to the class. He used to do that. It's a little different to give a class when your spiritual master is sitting there. So then, so I gave the class. At the end of the class, these people, they were sitting in Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada had said to his servant, as soon as I had finished the lecture, when he got up to go back to his room, he said, "He speaks very nicely. Why isn't he managing something?" Then I was told that. I said, wait a minute, what does this mean? I said, why do I have to now get involved in all this management just because I speak nicely? It doesn't make sense. And then all these people in Vrindavan, they came in and they said, he speaks very nicely. Why is he not the president here? And from one day to the next, I went from being the president, being the BBT secretary to being a president. Oh, was it miserable for me. But then later on, I began to understand more what Prabhupada was talking about. I asked him to please kindly explain why I had to do this just because I was preaching. I thought, isn't it better to preach when you're a preacher instead of manage? And he said, what do you mean manage? You simply preach. Later on, when there was time to make an office, he said, what do you need an office for? I said, all I need is a place to put a file cabinet and a sit down. He said, why sit down? Why office? Prabhupada was very radical, What do you need an office for? You simply preach. He was saying very clearly, if you want to manage, you just preach. Then everybody does everything automatically. You never have to force anybody to do anything. They're so inspired, they run around like mad doing things for Krishna. Of course, that's very good. You can do like that. Maybe in the West it's a little different. One may need an office, a little one. Throw down his seat and a telephone. In Vrindavan, there's no question of calling anybody on the telephone. There's nobody to call anyway. No one else has a telephone. Our telephone number is 13. And it's a new connection, So, yeah. Of course, there are different cultural differences are there. But the point is that actually a society will go well when there is a proper spiritual instruction. Then everybody will do what they are supposed to do because they will know what they are supposed to do. Especially in this Krishna consciousness movement, everybody has that spiritual intelligence to begin with. Because otherwise they wouldn't be a devotee in this movement. You can't be a devotee unless you got that spiritual intelligence. That I am a spirit soul. I am part and parcel of the Supreme. I am meant to serve Him. I am here to serve Him. I want to serve Him. So that intelligence is there. So if one is hearing a little about Krishna, then he wants to do that. Of course, the problem comes when the material false ego steps in the picture and starts telling one that I am very great, I am very learned, I am very opulent, I am very beautiful, I am very expert, I am very intelligent, I'm very learned, I'm very renounced, I should not have to be told to do this or that or this or that. Practically speaking, the hardest thing is for one to accept an instruction. And it is amazing how Jadabharata will immediately come out and start chastising this king like anything. He will immediately come out and say, "My dear sir, you are a total fool." Krishna did that with Arjuna as well. Asocham anusocam tvam pragyam vadam strabhasashe gatasums sa gatasums va nanusochiti pandita. You are speaking so-called learned words, which are narjadustam. They're not fit for one who's an Arya, or a higher class of man. They are fit for one who's a fool, a lamenter. Therefore, although you speak big, nice, fancy words, your words show there is no experience. This is exactly what Jadabharata will tell Maharaj Rahugana. Although you speak so eloquently, these words display there is no experience. Whereas just the opposite is true of a learned Brahmana. He may not even speak eloquently, but his words show great experience. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada did not speak English in an eloquent fashion according to the grammatical point of view. But his words convey absolute truth and knowledge. Therefore, no one even considers the grammatical point of view. That the words shall be grammatically correct or not. It's not even important. The only reason he even had his books edited was because professors would be disturbed because they are hung up on words. Therefore, he permitted his books to be edited so that the grammar would be correct. Otherwise, there's no need. There's absolutely no need. Even if imperfectly composed, words which describe the absolute truth are perfect. Even if there is some fault in the presentation. But that is not the point. The point is absolute knowledge. This is the point. So, Maharaj Rahugana chastised the king very strongly. Chastisement is there, required. Otherwise, unless one hears from a submissive point of view, he cannot properly hear. Therefore, the most important point for hearing is submission. Submissive oral reception. You may have heard that word, that phrase before. Submissive oral reception. Which means one very submissively hears from an authority. If he submissively hears from an authority, then he will know how to act. He will actually be able to get his philosophical understanding together. But if one does not submissively hear from an authority, even he's hearing so many philosophical words, they will not go into his head. He will not be able to understand them. They will just not enter in. They will bounce off. Therefore, submissive hearing is required. You have to take the wax of the false ego out of the ears. The wax of the false ego, very thick, dull substance. It has to be scraped out. Then one can hear, actually, the spiritual philosophy. So it's a very essential thing. Submissiveness, humility, humbleness. One has to be very humble, submissive. He has to know, I've got problems. What are the solutions? Let me hear. Let me hear. I want to hear what my spiritual master has to say. I want to hear what is Srimad Bhagavatam class saying. It does not even matter if the person speaking is terribly eloquent or terribly learned. If he simply vibrates the absolute truth to whatever degree he knows, that's purifying. It's purifying. Therefore, one should always nityam bhagavata sevaya. Always hear Bhagavatam. Always serve spiritual master. Always listen to spiritual master. Always be submissive to his instructions. Always be submissive to his philosophical explanations. One should never consider himself very advanced. As soon as he does that, or he presents himself before spiritual master as very advanced, immediately his head is again on that old block. That old bloody block, That block that's been used time and time again. If you want to put your head on the block, you just come before Spiritual Master as a very learned person, as a very expert. Then he's not going to allow that you, fool, think yourself very great. I remember so many times, so many personalities presented themselves before Srila Prabhupada as so learned. None of those personalities are still in this movement. And if you present yourself as a fool before the Spiritual Master, you get the mercy of the Spiritual Master. Not only that, that's pleasing to Krishna. Not only that, but that submissiveness means you'll be able to hear what the Spiritual Master says. If you present yourself as a great learned scholar, then you'll never listen, because you've already heard everything. And not only that, but you'll never think that any of these instructions the Spiritual Master gives are for you. You'll never think that if he says, you're in Maya, in general, people are in Maya in general, they have bodily conception of life, one will think, well, not I, I'm a learned scholar. Or, sir, your mind is driving you crazy. Not I, I'm very controlled. I have everything together. Usually it's a person who thinks like that is the first one to go away. Why? Because his mind is not controlled and he's not very learned. Because as soon as somebody says to him, you're not very controlled or very learned, he immediately says, what? You have no culture. And becomes very disturbed and goes away. But one who knows he's a fool, if others come up and tell him he's a fool, he'll go, well, I don't like to hear it, but it's a fact. Why don't you have some mercy on me? How can you think badly of such a person? If you come up to somebody and say, you knucklehead, and he goes, it's a fact, then you can't go on chastising. Of course, some are expert at doing this as a great defense. You tell them, you knucklehead, and they say, yes, I'm a knucklehead. But what can I do? Then immediately you can get out the old, pull the, because this is a spiritual process. And of course you can do something. If you are a fool, and then you use that as an excuse as to why you shall go on being a fool. You see, the point is that you may be a fool, that's okay. But the point is to try to stop being a fool. Of course, that may never happen, but you've got to at least try, just like Guru Dakshini. You can never pay back the Spiritual Master. The debt is eternal, but you've got to try. It's not that, I can't pay back the debt, therefore I won't give anything to my Spiritual Master. I won't do anything for him. No, you've got to try. You've got a debt, so you have to try to pay it back. You won't succeed in fully paying it back, but if at least you pay back 90% of it or whatever, isn't that nice? Don't you think there's a qualitative difference between a loan of 800 million crowns and paying back 600 and only having a loan of 200 million crowns? You don't think the person who loaned you the money thinks there's a difference? Of course. At least he's lost only 200 instead of 800. So one should consider in this way that yes, I should be submissive to my Spiritual Master. I should understand that I am a fool, all right. And I should take advantage of his words and instructions to correct that. I should correct that. I should listen. I shouldn't think of myself as so learned and wonderful that I can't hear. And when the chastisements come, say, thank you. What a relief. Don't say, how can he say that? This is not very nice. Of course it's difficult. It's difficult. Very, very difficult. I remember being chastised by Prabhupada in different times when I just could not simply understand at all why. Even sometimes I would imitate some scientist who, I never was into science up until the point maybe a few years ago. I knew absolutely nothing about science. In fact, don't tell anybody, but the only reason I passed my physics course in high school, which I had to take, is because I spelled my name right on the final examination. The teacher liked me. So he said, the only reason I passed you is because you spelled your name right. That otherwise, by grade, you failed. But because you spelled your name right, then I pass you because I like you. See? I think I took one biology course when I was in 9th grade. I think I got a C or something, middle average. And I never took any chemistry, and that was it. You see, not very good at these things. But when I came with Srila Prabhupada, I was tricked into taking the part of a scientist once. I'll tell you this story. Prabhupada's servants were changing, and I was part of the new changeover. Actually, we were continually changing. There was a group of 3 particular servants who were continually rotating in Srila Prabhupada's service. So it was time for me to be rotated back in, but in a new position this time. So I was to carry the microphone and be the one who records Srila Prabhupada's morning walks. So this was my new job. So the former secretary was convincing me that part of my responsibility is that I have to bring up opposing arguments. You see, I got a real reputation with Prabhupada about this. He says, always opposing. When are you ever going to learn? Anyway, that's another thing. So I was totally convinced. He convinced me. For one day he told me how I've got to become the atheist scientist so Prabhupada has somebody to argue against. And how I've got to represent the material scientist's point of view. Me, who didn't know anything whatsoever, even what the scientists said. I haven't the faintest idea in the world what scientists said. The closest thing I ever got to science is when we watched when the first rocket so-called hit the moon on TV. I don't remember. I think I was like 14 when it hit. I don't know, 15. I don't remember when it happened then. I remember that we saw that on TV and it was just like a boom, 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 finished. And then everybody was convinced man had, just smashed a rocket on the moon. Saw it on TV. Anyway, this is my only scientific knowledge. So here I am holding the microphone for Srila Prabhupada. And so he's in a morning walk. Sometimes he never said anything. There were a lot of morning walks where Prabhupada just went for a walk. And he didn't say anything. He was thinking so many things, chanting Hare Krishna. So on those times you should not disturb him. If he does not start the conversation, one should not disturb him. But because I was new at this particular service, no culture, so I was being pushed from behind. They were from behind going, come on, say something. It was a trap, of course. So then I brought up, Srila Prabhupada, the scientists say that, I don't even remember what I said. It was something ridiculous because I don't know what scientists said. And then he looked at me, he immediately understood everything. And then went on a non-stop chastisement that went on for half an hour. But I was so dull, I didn't even realize that he wasn't chastising me as a scientist, he was chastising me as me. So I kept bringing up the scientist this and the scientist that. All of it bogus because I had no idea what the scientist said. And then he kept chastising, and finally he said, "You are simply a fool. You have no faith in Krishna." And then I was devastated. Mind was swimming around, bewildered. I went back to the temple, listened to the tape 10 times. Each time I listened, I became more bewildered. I never spoke again on the morning walk during that time. That was it. In fact, I didn't even hold the microphone anymore. I immediately gave it back. Then I just listened for a long time until I finally caught on to the fact you're not supposed to put up challenges all the time like this. You're supposed to ask questions from the heart that you don't know. This is a completely wrong way to approach the spiritual master. I was cheated. Very good lessons were learned at this. Don't listen to somebody else. If he's telling you something, find out for yourself how to relate with spiritual master. That may seem a little shocking. But somebody else may tell you should relate with spiritual master like this, like this, like this. And then when you do it that way, he may slap you completely in the face. And then you say, what is this? Because he relates with everybody individually as a person. And it's different in each case. Yes, there are certain basic ground rules how to relate. The first basic ground rule is you should not be challenging and you should not speak disrespectfully. You should not present yourself when you're not wanted. You should always remember to pay obeisances. You should always try to be ready to offer services. You should never demand service from spiritual master. If he's willing to give it, that's nice. Otherwise, you don't. Simple basic ground rules like this. There are many more. But don't listen when somebody says you should do like this, you should do like this, you should do like this. Yeah. One should actually find out, according to his own relationship with spiritual master, how things work. I remember that I always wanted Srila Prabhupada to tell me something, more personal things. I always liked to get into this kind of mode of conversation. It was nectar to find out more about what he was doing, how to spread this Krishna consciousness movement from before. Never! He never spoke to me about these things. Never, never, never. Never. Then when Prabhupada Kripa Maharaj, he was Harisori at that time, became servant, then he would sit down with Srila Prabhupada and they would go on talking like old friends for hours. And I would be envious in the back room, listening through the door. Because I knew as soon as I walked in, everything's finished. So we had to listen through the door. All these nice things. So, if for instance, he had told me, this is what you should do, then I might have gone in and I have gotten slapped in the face. Because that's not what I should have done. Yeah? Everybody has a different kind of relationship when it comes more personally like that with their spiritual master. Yeah? One should not think, spiritual master, he relates personally with this one, but he does not relate with the other one. Like that. Because that's the way it is. Spiritual master will choose with each person how he wants him to relate. And not only that, but even though scientifically I knew nothing, and was not relating with Srila Prabhupada at all on that level, later on, he gave me many assignments which were totally scientific in nature. Who can understand this? Although I proved myself a total incompetent before him, later on, he turned that around and gave me that as an assignment. So who can understand this? You see? Spiritual master works very wonderfully because he knows the nature of people, he knows their capabilities. But when you approach him with a false ego or contaminations, you will not be able to receive that instruction immediately, which will bring one to the highest platform of spiritual realization. You may get slapped in the face a little bit, so you become purified. Maybe he will neglect you until you give up the idea that you're the king of the earth. Sometimes people think they're so wonderful. They present themselves before spiritual master as being so wonderful, but sometimes you may just neglect them, not even look at them, not even care about them. Because, first of all, you've got to give up the idea that you're the emperor, and then you'll be able to receive some instruction. It is a very, very vast thing, this whole business of relationship with spiritual master. But if you're very advanced and you present yourself as a fool, even you say something foolish, he will immediately chastise you in a way so that you will be able to get good instruction. But if you're not even so advanced, not capable of being chastised, then he may just say, okay, all right, just depart quickly, then tell someone else, make sure he doesn't come back here like that. Yeah? So, therefore, I give a good advice. If you don't mind, I'll give a good advice. And that is, always present yourself like a fool. That doesn't mean you have to say foolish things. Better you don't speak. But present yourself like a fool. If you challenge spiritual master, he may, because basically the humility is there. He may say, all right, yes, you're right, very good. In the beginning. Then he may, because he sees everybody else just became bewildered, smash you to pieces as well. If you're in nonsense. Or he may just say, all right, sure, okay, fine. But you'll never get any mercy of Krishna or spiritual master. Practically speaking, you just put an anchor on your life to finish yourself off. So, one has to be very, very careful what he says or what he does. And if he even disobeys the order of the spiritual master, again, he puts an immediate anchor on his spiritual life. Spiritual master comes up and says, do this. And you don't even do that. If at least you do it grudgingly, you can survive. But if you don't even do it, he says, do this, and you do something else. This is terrible. Very terrible thing. And you shouldn't also become totally bewildered if he tells you not to do something. And you think, but I must do that. It's like I remember when Prabhupada first received these 5th cantos. This book specifically. It was the first book produced after the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he received this in South Africa. And as he was receiving the book, he was so happy. I brought it in from the mail, put it on his desk, and he was so happy to pick up the book and read it. And this one photographer was there, snapping away. And I knew this was going to be trouble. Prabhupada looked up to him and said, "Stop this cut. I've told you this 1,000,000 times. Every nice moment I ever have, you ruin. If ever there's a nice moment, you ruin it with your cut. And then this person just became bewildered because he thinks this is his service, to destroy Prabhupada's nice moments for posterity, you know. This is the bane of the famous man, that your life lives on photographs. It does not, photographs and newsreels and videos and films, and it does not live in reality. It's only in photographs. Therefore you're supposed to smile and pretend you're having a nice time, so it looks good. But Prabhupada wasn't that kind of a person. So therefore he said, "You're ruining everything, get out of here." So then this boy, he became so bewildered, he left his camera, everything, and then just started running away. And then I came back to Prabhupada. I said, Prabhupada said later on, "Where is that photographer boy?" I said, "Last seen running down the street." Prabhupada said, "Go get him." There we were, running down the street too. Could not find him. Prabhupada was very disturbed. And he said, no advancement. If you receive chastisement and then you go away, no advancement. But if you can be chastised and take it, and then make advancement, very good. So the point is, if you can actually accept that, that's very good. And somebody may say, well, spiritual master never chastises me, therefore I must not be very advanced. Well, that may be true. Of course, with Sanatana Goswami it wasn't true. Sanatana Goswami came up to Lord Chaitanya and said, Jagadananda is always being chastised by you. Therefore, he is more advanced and receiving more of the favor of Krishna than me. I have never been chastised by you. And Lord Chaitanya said, just by seeing you, all 3 worlds are purified. How can I chastise you? And he said, no, I can understand that Jagadananda is receiving so much more mercy. And he grabbed the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya and said, please chastise me and show me the mercy like this. Lord Chaitanya was just standing there. He didn't know what to say. He said, just stop this. I can't tolerate this anymore. Stop it. So there is, of course, certain advanced souls who should not be chastised, but think they should because they're humble. And others who are foolish, who think they should not be chastised. And those who are chastised, who take it in a nice way too. Of course, Jagadananda, he was in a totally different relationship with Lord Chaitanya. Completely, he was like Satyabhama. He's an incarnation of Satyabhama. So when Lord Chaitanya refused to accept his sandalwood oil, he made sandalwood oil for Lord Chaitanya. Made a long time. Took this sandalwood oil. And then he presented it to Lord Chaitanya, and then Lord Chaitanya said, I cannot take sandalwood oil. I am a sannyasi. Sannyasis don't use sandalwood oil. Then Jagadananda said, what are you talking about oil? There's no oil. I never gave you any oil. What are you talking about? Then he took the pot and smashed it on the ground. It was a big pot of sandalwood oil. That's very expensive. Smashed it on the ground, and then went and laid down in a dark room for 3 days. To shut the doors, shut the windows, and lay down for 3 days and didn't move. And then Lord Chaitanya was just completely disturbed. He said, what can I do? If I do something wrong to Jagadananda, he will get very upset with me. And then how can I live if he's fasting and not eating and just sleeping there for 3 days in a dark room? Now, how can I go on living like this? So, there are all these various relationships. Of course, these are the pure devotees. Krishna's pure devotees. So they accept chastisement in different ways, out of love. But who here is on that platform? I'll answer that question. Nobody. So then, we have to understand that if there is chastisement, it is meant for benefit. One should take it because it is meant for benefit. And one should not just go into some dark room with his feet in the air for 3 days. He should understand that this is part of the process of spiritual advancement. And that if we are not being chastised, well, maybe we're doing something which is all right. And maybe we're so unadvanced we can't be chastised. But in any case, one should just consider he's a fool. Understand? You can't figure out all these things. Nobody can figure out all these things. That's the ultimate message. It is very personal, very specific. Spiritual master goes at his own pace in helping you to get purified, and he may chastise, may not chastise, but it is a question that one should always present himself as a fool. That means you should not walk in all the time bewildered. You should be ready to serve and ready to act properly. But ultimately you should know, I'm very unqualified. So anyway, these discussions are always very difficult because after all, who is even advanced enough to understand all these subtleties? But at least, maybe if they're spoken, someday somebody will understand something. And that will be very nice. At least someday somebody understands something. That will be very nice. You see, we are not going to be just satisfied having so many run-of-the-mill devotees, just plain old personalities. We want some very great personalities in each and every field. In each and every field we want experts, great experts. Those who are so expert that they are the most expert in the whole society in each and everything they do. This is what we want. Then they will be professors in their particular occupational duties. And then they will be able to train others. But you cannot become like that unless you become very submissive to the spiritual master, who can train you in various ways. Therefore we present these topics. Even Maharaja Ugna, he wasn't even a proper king till he heard from Jadabharg. Are there any questions? No, this is, what do you think this class is? Impersonal instruction? What do you think, this is indirect? Sometimes it's amazing, and when we give a class, devotees think that it's talking about somebody else. You know? You'll be looking around when I make a certain point, and somebody looks at somebody else and goes, see, yeah, see, mm-hmm. He looks around and says, oh, did that one see that? Did you hear that one? No, it's for you. There's a personal instruction. It's for you. This class is for you, and for you, and for you, and for you, and for you. It's personal, right? Not impersonal. It's direct. Straight from mouth to ear. It's not that you're hearing through anyone else, therefore indirect. It's direct. It's personal. And even if spiritual master will tell somebody else how to deal with you, that's also personal and direct. It's just another way of doing it. No, it's not spiritual master's business to, show you how to hang wallpaper. This is not what we mean. It means training in the principles of that particular occupational duty. And that is going on in the classes, and in other times too. Satisfaction in accepting one's prescribed duties. He may also show you how to hang wallpaper. He happens to know how to do that too. But that is not the business of spiritual master. sometimes when I speak about these subject matters, I realize that it's maybe a little difficult to understand. Because it's subtle. But I can give you a basic principle. It's personal. That's what it means. It's personal. Relationship between the spiritual master and disciple is personal in each and every case. Don't think that it's not. Don't think just because spiritual master doesn't have a discussion with me in his room that he doesn't, I don't have a personal relationship with him. This is not true. This is not true. Srila Prabhupada only met his spiritual master a handful of times. He said he only associated with him, actually, for some weeks. For some weeks. This personal association is not the basic principle. The basic principle is to understand how the instruction is personal. How the holy name of Krishna is personal. That even if the spiritual master is not there, one should act as if he was. Although, of course, that's difficult. But still, the instruction is there. One should fulfill that instruction. Try to please him. He knows when you aren't doing nicely. He knows that. He hears. He appreciates. All right, Hare Krishna. Yes. What can be done to make sentimentality go away quicker? Especially in relationship to spiritual master and disciple. Well, one has to hear. If one hears the instruction of spiritual master and hears the philosophical direction being given, so this is not sentimental. It's like now, this interchange that is taking place here. You are questioning, we are answering. You are hearing, we are speaking. This is not sentimental in any way. But sentimentality could mean something like, when spiritual master is just walking down the street and you're standing there, so he smiles at you. And then you go, ah! Something stupid like that. So, this is certainly sentimentality. Therefore, sometime you may have noticed when we are walking, we sometimes smile and sometimes we just look down. Because we know if we smile, it'll become too much. So, one has to be very careful that when the spiritual master is speaking, he's hearing very carefully. Just like, to give an example, somebody just wrote me a letter saying that he doesn't think he has a personal relationship with the spiritual master, and therefore he's very much concerned and he has so many doubts and he wants to go away. But this person's not even here in the class. So he thinks personal relationship means that you come into the room of the spiritual master and then you speak to the spiritual master and he tells you something personal. But that's ridiculous. This is also personal. You are persons. We are speaking to you. We're telling you about Krishna. We're telling you about spiritual life. This is personal. This is not impersonal. The instruction is there given to all, equally. It is a perfect instruction for Krishna conscious development. It is not that you have to come and sit in the room and then that instruction is better somehow than this instruction. Because when one gets some so-called personal instruction, it is something very minor generally. But sometimes people are so sentimental, they think that, well, that instruction is not very important.
More important, this instruction given here in this open forum, that's not very important. More important is this personal instruction. But that's sentimentality. So therefore, if you just come to these classes and hear, then you are acting on the platform above sentimentality, and you are safe. But if you are thinking that you require some so-called personal instruction, then gradually things are starting to become bogged down in sentimentality, and they can become disturbing too.
But we can see from past history that many of those who have been quoted as the Prabhupada like that they had very much trouble later on in their spiritual life to how to combine these points.
It is not at all necessary to have personal service to the spiritual master. That is a kind of illusion, because then you start thinking of the spiritual master as a material body. So that is not at all required. What is required? That you hear what the spiritual master has to say about Krishna. That's required. Just like when I was serving Srila Prabhupada personally, my main service was to hear him, because I was typing his tapes from his books. This was my most ecstatic service. I was so much desiring to hear directly him translate his books, to hear him actually dictating these literatures, and to type that down. I was just in complete ecstasy doing that. I would forget about the whole world and just simply listen to Prabhupada dictating his books and type it all down. Because I knew that this was the real association with Srila Prabhupada. The bodily association I was not so much concerned with, but I was taking care of that. Whatever he wanted, I would do very nicely. But my real business was to hear what he was saying in the book. And when he would give class in the morning, I was always there listening very carefully. So, it is not a fact that if you have a personal association with the spiritual master that you have to have trouble. But if you consider that this is everything, then you get trouble. If you consider that spiritual masters eating and sleeping, this is everything, then you get in trouble. But if you consider the instructions coming from the spiritual master, then you can survive very nicely and make great advancement in spiritual life. So it is not recommended to become personal servants. And those who are personal servants have to be very careful never to become familiar with the spiritual master, because it said familiarity breeds contempt. So you shouldn't worry if you don't have personal association with spiritual master. You have this is personal. It drives me crazy when devotees say, I don't have any personal association. Well, what do you call this? What do you think I'm doing over here anyway? Is this impersonal? Am I sitting here like a big effulgence and some words are floating in the air? I'm person, you know? You're also a person. It's just that I'm talking to a lot of you at once instead of just one at a time. Because it's not practical if I had to give this lecture to each and every one of you. So therefore we have arranged that everybody sits here and all at once we talk to everybody. This is practical. It is not impersonal, it's personal. And it's practical Krishna consciousness.
What is the terms of that relationship? What that means? And what is the function of each in the direction of the other? What
Well, the spiritual master is the eternal Lord of his disciples. The disciple is the eternal servant of the spiritual master. So, even in the spiritual realm, one will be always serving Krishna under the direction of the spiritual master.
What does that mean? It does not necessarily mean the spiritual master will say, you do this, you do this. But it means the spiritual master has given the instruction. You should serve Krishna 24 hours a day. So when you go to the spiritual world and you're serving Krishna 24 hours a day, you are working under his instruction. So eternally, you are following his orders. So that is the relationship always of servitorship, that the disciple is always a servant of the spiritual master. And the spiritual master's business is to impart knowledge into the heart of the disciple. He plants that knowledge, he injects that knowledge forcefully. Even if you want to remain ignorant, the spiritual master will wake you up. If you are sincere. Otherwise, if you are insincere and you want to remain ignorant, then nobody can wake you up. But if you are sincere, then the spiritual master will inject that knowledge into your heart and wake you up from the sleeping condition in this material world. And he will engage you in Krishna's service by his instruction. Exactly which devotional service you do, that is a detail. But the spiritual master's business is to inspire you to perform devotional service. Then there are so many authorities in the Krishna consciousness movement who are giving you the particular services to perform. So don't mix up the two. The spiritual master is teaching you perform service to Krishna. Engage in devotional service to Krishna. And in this way, his real relationship with you is manifested. Because he is convincing you to surrender to Krishna and serve Krishna nicely.
Yesterday you mentioned that disciple said he doesn't feel a personal relation to you. Does that mean he doesn't satisfy you?
Personal relationship is always there. So if you simply engage in devotional service, then you will satisfy the spiritual master. So whether you feel personal relationship or not, that is a problem in your own mind. For the spiritual master, it is all personal. But he will, if you engage in service, even if you have this misunderstanding in mind, spiritual master will be pleased that you are engaged in service. But because there is this lack of loving relationship, again, this love, this is the key in devotional service. If you serve with love, then you actually satisfy the spiritual master. The spiritual master actually wants to see that you are engaged in serving him in love. Then he is very pleased. So if somebody has some doubt in his mind, that doubt will be translated into a lack of love. Something will be lacking there. And therefore it will be very difficult to please Krishna or the spiritual master. So always try to be a lover of the Supreme Lord. In this way your life will be a success. You should just avoid having to deal with such persons. If you are coming in contact with anybody who is upper sampradaya, you should just avoid them completely. Because if you relate with them, you will become contaminated with them, by them. Now, of course, you can preach to them and try to convince them otherwise, but that is a very difficult thing to do because they are so convinced in their sampradaya that they are right. So you should just avoid them. Just seeing the residents of the Dham and material vision refers more or less to like rickshawwalas and shopkeepers and people like that.
It is said that Krishna's devotees never lost, but what is the fate of these
Krishna's devotees never
lost?
Lost.
What is the fate of devotee who falls down from a high position and devotee who guided some other devotees, and these devotees by his fall down lose the faith in spiritual life? What is his fate?
For one who was acting as spiritual master, for instance, and then falls down, for him the reaction is very severe, because he was acting as Krishna's representative. Then he broke the faith of Krishna by not being able to maintain. Therefore, for him, his reaction is very severe. He has to suffer very much for that. Maybe not even over one lifetime, maybe over many lifetimes. Krishna is merciful, but he does not like that at all. Therefore, it is not at all good results. Good results are not attained.
At the end, he came back.
At the end means after quite some time, he can also come back to Krishna. Maybe somebody has temporary fall. There are two kinds of fall. One is called temporary, and the other is called long-standing. A temporary fall, this we do not take so seriously. Apichat sudaracharo bhajanti mamananibhak. So this fall took place. So this is due to the nature of the material world. So again, he comes back. So reaction is not so severe. Krishna will accept his coming back and his sincere endeavor. And it is actually very difficult to come back immediately after falling, because there's so much loss of prestige. But somebody who does do like that, he's very strong, and we accept him again with blessings. But somebody who goes away for a long time, for him it is very difficult to come back. Extremely difficult. Yes.
But because man is so puffed up that he thinks he has to adjust the system to time, place, and circumstances, the whole thing is always lost. Why? Because man wants economic development. So people won't give donations to the church unless the system has some way to connect them. So the system has to always change to allow these more, shall we say, fallen persons to still be within the confines of the church in order they can get more donations. And then they start building up big empires, and that requires more money, so they have to loosen the rules more and more, until finally anybody can be anything, just as long as he says he loves God, and he pays his money to that particular church. Then he's religious man, accepted as member. So this is the cause of degradation. Economic development is always the cause of degradation. It is a very dangerous thing. It has destroyed almost every institution there is. This overwhelming desire simply to bring in wealth and opulence has been the cause of all kinds of problems. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya's movement is based on quite the opposite principle, which is Vairagya Vidya, simplicity. Yeah. Simply engaged in hearing and chanting the holy name of the Lord, and using everything in Krishna's service. Now someone may say, well then, where does that leave anyone who has any opulence? Well then they go into the category of Maharaj Prataparudra, Varnashram. We have to support all such Brahmanas and Vaishnavas who don't want to simply waste their time all day making money. That's why Varnashram is required, so that we will allow persons to act within Krishna consciousness by making money, but supporting these Brahmanas, Vaishnavas directly. Then we don't have to change our spiritual principles to make everybody think that they're part of the, shall we say, Brahminical class, or they're part of the most religious class of man, priestly class, so they'll give some donation or something. We just let them say, all right, you're supporting, that's all. And our principles remain very strict. And even if nobody follows, the principles will remain the same. We don't change them. Sometimes people think that Prabhupada changed some principles in order to allow Westerners to join. That's absolutely not true. Nothing's changed. It's just that in the beginning, he was less strict on who he would allow even in the temple. Yeah. Anyone could come. But after a while, when some were trained up, then the standards of what you could do when you were there changed a little. Yeah. In other words, in the beginning, some would even come and, while kirtan was going on, stand on their head in front of the deities and look at the deities upside down. One such person who did that when he first came to the temple is presently one of our acharyas. Yeah. So, although in those days, that wasn't far out. Today you try that in the temple, you get thrown out on the same head. You can stand on the head out in the door. Nobody would accept this thing. In those days, Prabhupada just smiled. And then, after a few days, one realizes, well, this is insane. Why should I look at the deities upside down? I could look at them right side up. And then everything went on very nicely. So, in the beginning, the principle that was given by Rupa Goswami, Yena Tena Prakarena Mana Krishna Niveshayad, is in the beginning, try to get somebody to just think of Krishna. And then, automatically, all of these rules and regulations follow. So Prabhupada perfectly followed a principle which was established 500 years ago, which was a quote from the Puranas even longer ago. Principle. No principles have ever been concocted. They are just sometimes manifested and sometimes not. They're not manifested, so many principles are not manifested in the beginning, but then they manifest more and more and more. But never was there a change. Never was there, okay, you can eat meat once a week. Or, okay, you can have illicit sex, once a month. Or, okay, we can gamble if it makes some money. The principles were never changed. Principle of rising early, taking shower, was never changed. Actually, there's no difference between what we are doing and what the so-called strict Vaishnavas are doing. They just do more rigmarole. And it is rigmarole. Sometimes simply spending all day throwing water this way, chanting mantra this way, that way, marching here, going there, doing this, doing that. They don't do any preaching. In some places. In some places, they do all of that and are preaching like anything because they're followed by hundreds of thousands of people in festivals. And then the Brahminical class is very much appreciated. But if you just have some brahmanas sitting around doing some throwing this, throwing that, and they're not doing any preaching or teaching anybody, and nobody's inspired, then what's the use? So some places you have that. Some places you still have the culture where all these things are appreciated. And in some places, you have such a strict authoritarian caste system, even amongst so-called Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that when it's time to sit down to take prasadam, everybody must sit according to the moment when he was first initiated. That means if you were initiated at the same day as someone else, you will have to sit according to which minute you were initiated. And it will be very strictly set down to the minute. And if you try to sit in a different place, they will pick you up and throw you out, physically. And all the sannyasis will sit in a platform, higher. And if anyone else ever dared to sit or even lean on that platform, he would be physically thrown out. This is where some Gaudiya Vaishnavas are at today. In this way, prasadam becomes the most anxiety-ridden activity you can ever imagine. So it is not that because Prabhupada didn't institute that insanity, that he changed something. No. He simply made it, again, what it really should be, a spiritual experience. He went back to the original thing. Sometimes they criticize Prabhupada for having women in the temple. But you go to any one of their ceremonies, or parikrams, you'll find it's 96% women. Yet they'll criticize Prabhupada because he has women in the temple. That's ridiculous. We're dealing here with envious people. The real point is that Prabhupada has given us everything, and now we are just filling in all the details more and more as he wanted. Filling in more details of the Brahminical aspect, the deity worship, the mantras, the yantras, the details of procedure, tantras. For that, we are filling in more of the details for all aspects of knowledge to reestablish the varnashram in each and every varna, to establish the proper way to acting in the ashrama life, to establish most of all the preaching as the topmost mission of all of this, to establish the book production and distribution as the absolute necessity to make this go on. Actually speaking, Prabhupada has renewed the entire of spiritual life, which was almost dead. Renewed and reestablished spirituality on the absolute platform, which was almost dead, which had almost lost everything. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada had reestablished it he resurrected it. But it wasn't sufficient. It was sufficient because there was one perfect follower of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati who was capable of actually establishing it. Therefore, we have to keep it afloat. Prabhupada once said, just before he left, just maintain what I have given you. At least maintain what I have given you. That'll be sufficient. Yeah. And if you can expand, oh, how much nicer. So, therefore, we are trying to establish in this way the absolute principles in other aspects of life as well. The varnashram principles. And thus establish within each and every discipline absolute principle. Just like the modern medical system doesn't know anything. Because they don't know what is the soul, what is the source of life, where the consciousness comes from, what controls the nerve patterns in the brain, what controls the bodily functions, why things go as they go. They don't know, and they'll never know, as long as they avoid understanding the soul and understanding the subtle body, understanding how this interfaces with the gross body. Therefore, we're trying to establish proper medicine on the spiritual platform. Just like nowadays, so many people get into so many different disciplines. That was one example. But if you don't know the basis, you'll never know how it moves forward. You'll never know how it relates with reality. It'll be some connection with illusion, like a grand drama and play. But it won't have any real connection with reality. Therefore, actually, Prabhupada's mission was meant to pervade the whole society. What to speak of just medically, you can talk politically. When the leaders of state don't know what is the body, what is the mind, what is the soul, what is the connection to the Lord, He's the controller, He's the enjoyer, then they'll organize the society in completely backwards principles. That we are the enjoyers, we are the controllers, and everyone will suffer. Economically, that's so. In every aspect of life, you can go through it one after another and see how the lack of spiritual principles is causing the destruction of this human society. So therefore, Prabhupada has given this most wonderful gift of pure spiritual principles, which actually can establish in every sphere of life the perfect way of action, and which can develop into a huge, wonderful spiritual creation, spiritual world. Therefore, take it very seriously and try to be Krishna conscious. You'll find there'll be no greater benefit in life. Hare Krishna.